held its weekly meeting today, and it is my pleasure to invite Vice President Jourova to provide you the readout from this meeting. Vice President.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for our college readout, which will be the last one ahead of the summer break. And also let me express my happiness that I can see some of you physically here. This is a nice change. But today we started our college meeting with a minute of silence in memory of the lives lost in recent days due to the devastating floods that have hit several member states, including Belgium, our host country. I would like to reiterate on behalf of all of my colleagues our condolences. There are no words to describe the suffering of those who have lost their loved ones. Our thoughts are with those who have been affected in one way or another. Then the College adopted today the report on the situation of the rule of law in the EU. And Commissioner Reynders and I will present the reports to you shortly. In addition, the College adopted an ambitious legislative package to address money laundering, and this file will be presented to you by Executive Vice President Dombrovskis and Commissioner McGuinness later today. We also adopted a recommendation to the Council to authorise the opening of negotiations for an agreement between the EU and the UK, United Kingdom, in respect of Gibraltar. As you might remember, Gibraltar is not covered by the trade and cooperation agreement concluded by the EU and the UK. In the recommendation, we asked to nominate the Commission as negotiator on behalf of the Union. The College also took today's some human resources decisions. Amongst them, I am happy to announce that Miriam Ferran has been appointed as Deputy Director General for International Partnerships, DG INPA. Ms. Ferran is a French national and she is currently a Director in DG NIR. We have also decided to transfer Mrs. Joanna Drake from the position of Deputy Director General for Environment to the same position in DG Research and Innovation, in charge of implementation, impact and sustainable investment strategies. In turn, Mr. Patrick Child, who currently holds the position, will take over Mrs. Drake's position as Deputy Director General in DG ENVI. Before we come to the rule of law report, let me inform you about another decision of the College today regarding the rule of law, more specifically regarding Poland. The European Commission decided today to empower the Commissioner Reynders in his role as Commissioner for Justice to adopt measures to induce the Republic of Poland to comply with an order and a judgment of the Court of Justice. We have sent a letter on this matter. We have asked Poland to confirm to the Commission that it will fully comply with the order of the Court of the 14th of July on the disciplinary chamber. Poland needs to inform us about the measures foreseen to that effect by the 16th of August, as requested by the Court. Failing that, the Commission will request the European Court of Justice to impose a penalty payment on Poland. Equally, if Poland does not confirm that it will take all the necessary measures to fully comply with the judgment of the 15th of July regarding the disciplinary chamber, the Commission will launch an infringement procedure under Article 260/2, meaning that also in this case we will ask for financial sanctions if Poland does not remedy the situation by the 16th of August. Let me repeat that we have said many times. EU law has primacy over national law. All decisions by the European Court of Justice, including orders for interim measures, are binding on all Member States' authorities and national courts. The rights of EU citizens and businesses must be protected in the same way across all Member States. There can be no compromise on this. Therefore, the Commission has taken swift and clear decisions on this matter today, and Commissioner Reynders can provide you with more details. Under any other business, also Commissioner Breton presented to us the Commission's reply to a resolution by the European Parliament in which it asks the Commission to undertake an impact assessment and bring forward legislation to enable the swift removal of illegal online transmissions of sports events. This is in line with our commitment to discuss such Parliament initiatives in the College. We want to decide in 2022 what type of action can be taken following the completion of the impact assessment and in view of the negotiations for the Digital Services Act. So, ladies and gentlemen, now please let me turn to the rule of law report and inform you about what we have decided today. Because we are here to present the second edition of the rule of law report. Like its first edition, also this year's report presents the most comprehensive snapshot of the rule of law situation across the EU, covering all EU member states, focusing on developments in the last 12 months. The annual report is a central tool in the EU's toolkit designed to ensure the respect of rule of law. We have jointly agreed on a range of measures at our disposal to promote, to prevent and to respond to rule of law issues in our member states. These measures range from monitoring rule of law developments to addressing EU law breaches through our infringement system or resorting to the Article 7 procedure to address risks of serious breaches of our common values. To address rule of law abuses against the financial interests of the EU, we have the new budgetary conditionality regulation at our disposal as well. There is no doubt that we need to step up our actions to uphold the rule of law. In the very recent years, we have witnessed democracies all over the world experience unprecedented attempts at attacking their institutions and rules-based systems. The European Union and the member states in no way are immune to similar forces that seek to challenge the very foundations of democratic countries. Democracy, rule of law and fundamental rights are the foundations on which everything else is based in our Union. Our rights, the freedom of press or the independence of the judiciary. The treaty establishing the EU is clear about this. We also have clear jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. The rule of law report is first and foremost a preventive mechanism that fosters dialogue and mutual trust. Let me first invite you to the topic of the process. We have applied the same methodology and the same inclusive process as in case of the first rule of law report last year. This predictability has paid off and increased the solidity and coherence of the exercise. Protecting the rule of law is the work for many authorities. It's not only for the Commission. So it's important that we have had a discussion with the Member States authorities and also that by preparing the second edition of the rule of law report, we have consulted hundreds of organizations in Europe. Second, on substance. As was the case in our first report, also the second edition focuses on the four key pillars of a broad concept of the rule of law, which means justice systems, anti-corruption frameworks, media freedom and pluralism, and institutional issues related to checks and balances. In addition, we looked at how the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has affected the national systems of checks and balances. The prolonged pandemic has been a stress test also to the rule of law. The report shows the resilience of the national systems of checks and balances to help our democratic oversight be better prepared for similar crises in the future. The report provides a good basis for reflection. Also, the rule of law report helps raise awareness about seriousness of these issues among member states. I think many countries see that if fundamental justice reforms raises many controversies, it is important to have a proper debate and consultation internally, but also with the European Commission or with the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe. And also, it's important that after each rule of law report, as you know, thorough debate at the Council level is continuing. So this is part of the whole debate around the report. The second chapter, which I wanted to mention here regarding the substance, is the situation of media and the safety of journalists. Many member states reported about increased harassment, threats, and violence against journalists, especially women journalists and media as such. The tragic murder of Dutch journalist Peter de Vries is the latest of the series of worrying attacks on European journalists in recent years. On top of that, we have fresh media reports alleging that some journalists in the EU were subject to surveillance, and this is unacceptable. Independent media is elemental for the functioning of any democracy. This is why media freedom and pluralism is one of our 4 pillars of the report. Journalists must be able to do their work and ask questions without fear or favor. An attack on a journalist is an attack on freedom of press and on democracy. The findings of this year's Rule of Law report support us in our work as we are preparing a recommendation to all member states on the safety of journalists. We work on measures to fight abusive litigation against journalists and rights defenders, and we are also working on designing the Media Freedom Act with Thierry Breton. Finally, the Rule of Law report is not an end in itself. It is for a part of continuous dialogue between the Commission and the Member States, including national parliaments. Like last year, together with Didier Reynders, we will discuss the respective Rule of Law reports in the national parliaments of Member States. This has proven a very useful exercise last year, and it triggered further debate in the countries. And of course, as I mentioned before, we will present the findings in the European Parliament and in the Council. We are of a very strong conviction that it's better to prevent than to repair. And this Rule of Law report, which, as I said at the beginning, is a preventive tool, I think is a very useful tool we have in our hands now to achieve that. Didier, now it's for you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vera. D'abord, je voudrais vous saluer toutes et tous, parce que c'est de nouveau l'occasion de vous trouver cette fois-ci un peu plus nombreux que la fois dernière aussi dans la salle. C'est un plaisir de pouvoir vous présenter dès lors le 2e rapport concernant l'état de droit dans l'Union européenne. Et je dirais que ce qui est important de constater dans un premier temps, c'est la possibilité de voir évoluer la situation de l'état de droit en fonction justement des remarques que nous avons formulées dans le premier rapport. Il y a un vrai dialogue avec les États membres sur base du premier rapport, et on a vu une série de réformes proposées dans toute une série d'États membres pour améliorer la situation au départ des remarques que nous avions formulées dans le premier rapport. Donc c'est vraiment un instrument qui permet d'influencer la situation dans les États membres, et c'est important parce que cela permettra année après année de voir comment nous réussissons à faire progresser un certain nombre de dossiers concernant les différents chapitres du rapport sur l'état de droit. Je voudrais évidemment vous dire que sur base du premier rapport, nous avons eu l'occasion de mener déjà un certain nombre de débats parce que le but, c'est d'installer une culture de l'état de droit. Alors ces débats, ils ont eu lieu au Conseil Affaires Générales, où il y a eu un débat sur l'ensemble du rapport pendant la présidence allemande et puis sur 5 premiers États membres. Sous présidence portugaise, la démarche s'est poursuivie de la même manière, avec aussi une analyse de 5 États membres. Et nous avons déjà sur le rapport de cette année l'engagement de la Slovénie comme de la France, prochaine présidence du Conseil, d'agir de la même manière. Donc aussi une analyse tout d'abord sous présidence slovène du rapport dans son ensemble et puis de 5 États membres. Et nous allons continuer dans l'ordre alphabétique protocolaire des États membres. Mais indépendamment du débat au Conseil Affaires Générales, ce qui est important aussi, c'est de mener des débats de façon horizontale dans d'autres formations du Conseil. J'ai entamé ce débat avec les ministres de la Justice au sein du Conseil Justice, par exemple sous présidence portugaise concernant l'indépendance des parquets, et je souhaiterais continuer sous présidence slovène concernant les nominations et les régimes disciplinaires des magistrats, en ce compris les réformes des conseils de justice qui jouent un rôle majeur en la matière. Le débat a lieu aussi au Parlement européen jusqu'à présent, nous avons pu avoir un débat général en plénière, des débats aussi sur l'un ou l'autre État membre, notamment dans la commission Libé. Mais j'ai de nouveau demandé au président du Parlement, au président de la commission Libé, aux principaux groupes, d'organiser, si possible, des débats sur les 27 États membres. Nous voulons vraiment montrer, comme nous le faisons au Conseil et au sein de la Commission, que le rapport porte sur l'ensemble des États membres, au départ d'une méthodologie applicable à l'ensemble de ces États. Et puis, comme la vice-présidente vient de le rappeler, nous avons mené pas mal de débats dans les parlements nationaux. J'ai pu personnellement organiser une vingtaine de débats dans les parlements nationaux, parce que ça nous permet de rencontrer non seulement la majorité, les gouvernements, mais aussi les oppositions. Et j'espère qu'après la publication du rapport de cette année, on pourra recommencer, mais cette fois-ci dans de vraies visites, pas uniquement virtuelles, ce débat dans les parlements nationaux et aussi auprès des sociétés civiles. Bien entendu, nous demanderons le soutien d'ailleurs d'un certain nombre d'organes de presse pour participer à ces débats, comme on le fera avec les universités, comme on le fera avec toute une série d'associations de la société civile. Je le répète, c'est vraiment la volonté d'avoir un dialogue avec les États membres, mais avec l'ensemble des participants dans ces États membres sur l'état de droit et d'installer une culture de l'état de droit. Et donc, c'est l'occasion de vous expliquer maintenant comment nous allons poursuivre avec le deuxième rapport. And this brings me to the 2021 report, the second one. We are entering a real cycle now with a tradition to publish a report on the rule of law. And the methodology is the same as in the first report, the scope also, with the 4 chapters that I don't want to describe again. And of course, with the same methodology, it's possible to build on the first report to explain the dialogue with the member states on many reforms. And I must say that the difference with the first report is that now we are just looking, if I may, to the developments, positive or negative developments, during the last 10 months. So it's very new in comparison with the first report, where it was possible to describe in general the situation in the member states and then the last developments. Now we are focusing on the last developments, and that explains maybe more reactions in the member states about different parts of the report due to the fact that we have described the situation in the last months. And what is new also in relation with the first report is the capacity to describe better the situation in relation with the COVID-19 crisis. Of course, in September last year, it was too early to say more on this. Now, we have described the situation, and what is important is to see that we have had an evolution along the crisis, with more and more oversight by the Parliament, by the courts and the tribunals about the measures taken by the government. And you know that during the crisis, we have seen another kind of repartition of competences between the Parliament and the government due to the emergency. It's very important to see that slowly it was possible to have a better oversight day after day. And of course, we have seen some problems in different member states about some specific measures, but we are thinking also about the future, about the need to have a legal framework to organize the process during a crisis, to organize the ways to transfer some competence from the parliaments to the government, but maintaining a real oversight on the different measures taken, again, by the different member states at the level of the government. Briefly, on the different chapters today, just to say that on the justice system, of course, we have some concern in some member states, and I want to repeat that when we have a concern, of course, we are using other tools sometimes than the report. So if it's needed, we go to the court or we use other kind of tools in our toolbox. But in the report, it was also very important to show that there are positive reforms in many member states about the independence of the judiciary, with the creation of the improvement of the judicial council. And the judicial councils are very important in many member states. I don't want to mention all the member states where there are discussions, but there is a constitutional reform for the moment in Luxembourg. There are discussions in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, so you see that there are many evolutions on this. And it's a real part of the independence of the justice system to have a judicial council and then to be able to discuss about the ways to appoint the judges and to organize again the disciplinary regime. So I'm hoping that we'll have the opportunity to discuss about this with all the Ministers of Justice on an horizontal level in the near future during the Slovenian presidency. The second issue about the justice system, of course, is the quality and the effectiveness of the justice system. And to that, it's very important to continue to invest in digital tools. And you know that we have published a communication last December about the digitalization of the justice system and the training of the professionals about the EU law, but also about the digital tools. And it's very important to see that in the recovery plans of the member states, now we have seen a lot of effort to promote the use of digital tools in the justice system. It's very important to continue to work on this for the efficiency of the justice system. And of course, again, if we have some concern about some kind of influence of the legislative or the executive branch on the justice system, we make the point in the report. If it's needed, we are going further with some other actions like infringement proceedings. I don't want to be too long about the anti-corruption framework. It was said by the Vice President before. It's a chapter more in charge of our colleague Ylva Johansson and the DG Home, and we have had a very good collaboration with many DGs, but certainly with DG Home about the anti-corruption framework. The main issue there is not so much to see if there are some strategies. It's more to see if there are enough resources allocated to the different bodies in charge of the fight against corruption. And that's the way we have described the situation in many member states. Of course, you know that it will be more and more important with the recovery plans, because we'll have the capacity to spend more money faster and with more flexibility. And so, of course, it's very important to continue to discuss about the ways to organize the criminal investigations, the prosecutions, and the application of sanctions in all the member states. About media freedom and media pluralism, I want just to insist on the fact that also it's more a chapter in charge of also Thierry Breton for DG Connect. And I don't want to repeat what was said about the violence against journalists, and certainly we have tried to describe also the last events concerning the assassination of Peter de Vries. Of course, it's difficult to explain in the report on the 20th of July the last information on the last days, but I want to say that we started also to analyze with Thierry Breton, DG Connect, the situation with the information related to the Pegasus project that you have seen in the last days and hours. And of course, there are now investigations in justice. To give an example, in France, the prosecutors decide to start an investigation on such a project, and the possibility to organize some intrusion in the different tools used by journalists. And of course, any such spying on media, if true, is simply unacceptable. And so we will work to follow the investigations in justice, but we will maybe describe the situation in the near future about that kind of evolution that we have seen. But the threats and the attacks against the journalists remain a real issue. I want just to add that there also we try to see if there are enough resources for the regulators in the media sector to try to guarantee the pluralism of the media, and we try to continue to ask the different member states to develop the transparency about the media ownership. That's also an important element. Maybe on the last chapter, just a comment about the checks and balances, and certainly during, I said, the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen some challenges for the checks and balances and the repartition of competence between the different levels of authorities. And so there also, it's a mixed picture. We have seen positive evolutions, but what I want to insist on is the fact that we have seen a better awareness of many citizens about their fundamental rights and their fundamental freedoms, because, of course, with the restrictions imposed during the pandemic, the reactions were stronger from different kinds of actors in the civil society. And so it's the reason why we try to see how it's possible to continue to work with an open civil society. I must say, I've said it to the college, so we have in Europe, in general, a very open civil society. But we have some concern about different financial restrictions or control in some member states on civil society organizations. So there also, and you know it was possible to go to the Court of Justice in some specific situation concerning the civil society organizations. And of course, in the report you will find a real important part about the primacy of the EU law and about the way to try to protect the exclusive competence of the Court of Justice in Luxembourg to give an interpretation of the EU law. Because The Union is a community of law, and if we don't have such a community of law with the same application of all the elements of the EU law in all the member states, we have a real problem with our Union. So it's very important to us to develop such a part of the analysis, and you have seen that we have introduced some infringement proceedings before the court about possible risk for the primacy of the EU law. Et donc, je voudrais terminer en vous disant que nous présentons effectivement le rapport 2021 aujourd'hui, mais en espérant que le débat, comme annoncé, va pouvoir se poursuivre au Conseil avec les États membres, se poursuivre au Parlement, je l'espère cette fois sur les 27 chapitres nationaux, et se poursuivre dans les parlements nationaux à l'occasion de visites sur place, et également d'ailleurs de manière horizontale, comme nous le faisons déjà au Conseil justice. Peut-être que dans d'autres formations du Conseil, il sera possible d'agir de cette même manière. Et pour conclure, il faut rappeler que le rapport ce n'est qu'un des instruments à la disposition de la Commission. Nous sommes évidemment déterminés à utiliser tous les autres instruments à notre disposition chaque fois que le dialogue ne sera pas suffisant sur base du rapport sur l'état de droit. Le rapport, c'est l'instrument préventif par excellence, le dialogue, l'évolution des réformes. Mais si ce n'est pas suffisant, nous n'hésiterons pas à continuer à travailler par des recours, notamment devant la Cour de justice. Et comme la vice-présidente l'a rappelé tout à l'heure, j'ai signé tout à l'heure la lettre aux autorités polonaises pour leur demander de respecter et d'appliquer les dernières décisions de la Cour de justice concernant la réforme de la justice en Pologne et les mesures provisoires décidées sur les procédures disciplinaires. Si nous n'avons pas de réponse satisfaisante d'ici le 16 août, nous n'hésiterons pas à saisir la Cour, en ce compris en demandant des sanctions financières. Si nous avons évidemment un engagement clair et des mesures précises pour respecter les décisions de la Cour, nous aurons fait un grand pas en avant dans la protection de la primauté du droit de l'Union et dans la défense des compétences de la Cour. Je rappelle que les décisions de la Cour sont contraignantes pour tous les États membres. Voilà ce que je peux vous dire sur le travail, en tout cas, qui a été réalisé avec une dizaine de directions générales et de services de la Commission, un grand nombre de commissaires et les représentations permanentes de la Commission à travers l'ensemble de l'Union. Et je tiens à nouveau à les remercier toutes et tous pour ce travail important qui, je le répète, devient un cycle annuel, et vous le verrez, d'année en année, avec une évolution, je l'espère, positive dans beaucoup d'États membres de l'état de droit à travers des réformes, et puis, lorsque ce n'est pas le cas, l'utilisation d'autres instruments pour tenter de freiner les évolutions négatives, de les stopper et peut-être de revenir à une bonne application de l'état de droit partout où c'est nécessaire.
Thank you very much to Vice President Jourova and Commissioner Reinders. I will now open the floor to your questions. I will alternate between questions asked from the room and questions asked online. And yes, the lady in the middle will be first. Please introduce yourself because we are not sure to recognize you with your masks.
Thank you, Dana. Petra von Willersdorf with Slovenian News Agency. I have 3 questions on Slovenia, a general one and 2 more concrete ones. First, can you help me understand what's your assessment of what happened with the rule of law in Slovenia in this past year? What message is here for Slovenia in this report? Second question is about the financing of the Slovenian News Agency. I can read in this report, I quote, "Concerns have been raised by national and international stakeholders following the refusal by the authorities to finance the Slovenian press agency." Well, as someone who has been living through the agony of all this for months now, I would say this is a clear understatement. And but my question is, why did you choose this wording when we heard much stronger messages already from the Commission in the past months? And the third question for Commissioner Reinders, how long are you going to wait before launching the infringement procedure because of the delays with the European delegated prosecutors? Thank you.
I will leave you the message and the EPPO, yeah, and I will reply on the situation of the Slovenian agency, press agency, because indeed, yes, I myself already several times very openly criticized the uncertain financing of this agency where you work for, if I understood well, that you are one of the journalists working for this agency. Because it is the public service press. And according to the Slovenian law, this service must have guaranteed stable financing so that it can do the work. So if you are missing the stronger declaration in the report, here I am coming with my declaration. Indeed, we are following the situation of the press agency, and we expect the Slovenian authorities to come back to the stable financing, which will enable you to do the work. We, of course, noted the fundraising, which was a spontaneous activity. I like it, but as an official of the Commission, I have to say this is not systemic and this is not desired, that the public service media are supported by the way of crowdfunding. And as you know, we also, as the Commission, replied with a very quick response on the question whether there is a state aid issue relating to the agency. And also the rapid response showed that the Commission really thinks that it matters whether the Slovenian press agency has sufficient sources to continue with the work or not.
Now, maybe first, your first question about the situation in general. First, you will read the report, I'm sure, in detail and not only the abstract, but just to give two examples about the justice systems. We have said that, of course, there are some improvements. If you look to, like in many other member states, the investment in ICT, in digital tools, and it will be the case again with the recovery plan, and we have seen some progress on backlogs. And so that's also the situation in other member states. But the challenge remains instead of prosecution, in effectively prosecuting economic and financial crimes, and the lengthy also court proceedings in money laundering cases. You know that this morning, you will see that later, we have taken some decisions about money laundering, but that's a real concern that we have put in the report. The same about the anti-corruption framework. Of course, we have seen some evolution with the Integrity and Prevention of Corruption Act, but the remark I said at the beginning is the same for Slovenia that for maybe other member states. It's maybe the need to go further in the development of skills and resource to the Commission able to implement the anti-corruption strategy. And so it's more in the implementation that we have a lot of remarks. About the press media, I don't want just to insist on the fact that in the last discussions that we have had in Slovenia with the entire Commission on the 1st of July and then with different ministers in the last days, we've insisted for a real financing and correct financing of the press agency. It's a very important request. Of course, you may have maybe the impression that there are different wording, but the commitment is the same. We ask to finance in a proper way such an agency to be able to have an effective work. And about the PPO, it's very clear. We are late. We are too late. Normally it was for the 1st of June. It was needed to have the appointment of the delegate prosecutor. So now we are analyzing the situation in Slovenia because you know that there is a new procedure, and so we'll see what are the consequences of such a new procedure, what is the legality of this. And we have said, and again in the last meeting with the justice ministers and the Minister of Justice of Slovenia, I repeat that we need to have as soon as possible the designation of the two delegate prosecutors. Why? First of all, because it's the regulation, and you're right, if it's a breach to the regulation, at the end we'll think about a possible procedure before the court. But it's more than that. The participation to the EPPO, it's a real important part in the ways to protect the EU budget. And so, of course, if we don't have an efficient protection of the EU budget through the EPPO, we need also to think about other tools after the summer, maybe, if I may, to decide on the way forward. But again, it must be very fast. Without that, we will have to take some other initiatives.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, go ahead.
Both commissioners, Did you notice any improvement in Bulgaria compared to the previous report, and which are the main issues which remain problematic for the country? Thank you.
Yes, okay. No, I want to say first, I said that in the discussions about the first report, we have seen that it was possible for different member states to come with action plans. And it was the case with Bulgaria. So first of all, I will say the first improvement is that, a positive reaction, not to come with many criticisms about the methodology, about the work done, but about the acceptance of some remarks and concerns and the way to come with a real proposal for a new set of reforms in an action plan. Of course, we have some concerns about, to be very concrete, the reform of the judicial map. And you know that when you organize a reform on the judicial map, just to take the example of the justice system, you need to decide about the appointment of the different presidents in the different districts for the different courts or tribunal. And so that puts at risk some elements concerning the independence, again, of the judges. So I have had already some discussions with the Minister of Justice in Bulgaria about that. But again, first element is the real capacity to organize an action plan to respond to all remarks in the first report. Now we are analyzing the implementation, certainly about the justice map. And the same, if I may, about the anti-corruption framework, is the same kind of issue. Or it's possible not only to pass some laws or to organize some reforms, but to put enough resources in the bodies in charge of the framework. And so that's the important element. You know that with Bulgaria, like with Romania, of course, we have other discussions in relation with the CVM. But also after the end of the CVM one day, we will continue, of course, to work with the annual report on the rule of law. And again, the main reaction and the most important reaction in Bulgaria was to come with an action plan. We need not to verify the implementation in all the different parts of the action plan.
Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to somebody who's connected remotely, and that is Tomasz.
Yes, it's Tomasz Bielecki of Deutsche Welle and Gazeta Wyborcza. Can you hear me?
Yes, all good, Tomasz. Go ahead. Yes, all good.
I have, in fact, two questions on Poland, both to Vice President and Commissioner. The first one, since the independent judiciary respecting the EU law primacy is a key element of anti-corruption system, do you consider the current situation in Poland as an obstacle to have the recovery and resilience plans green-lighted before Poland decides to follow the ECJ rulings? And the second question, you've mentioned today two possible proceedings in mid-August on ECJ interim order and ECJ last week judgment. But are you going to tackle also the issue of the Polish Constitutional Tribunal, which has denied the primacy of EU law last week and is going to hear and decide on the much broader question on the area of EU law primacy at the beginning of August, as requested by Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki? Thank you.
Maybe I will give some general comment, and Didier will complement it. First question, whether the current developments in the judiciary in Poland and the past development as well, if I understood well, the question is the barrier for the endorsement of the recovery plan. Well, the negotiations are ongoing. The Commission's negotiators are in a very intense contact and dialogue with the Polish representatives. And from the Commission side, there are the same requirements for all the member states who want to use the recovery funding to set a very robust system of control and audit, which is comparable with the system which works for the cohesion and agricultural policy. Because here we are building a new system which needs to comply with, if you want to, if you allow me to say, old good standards. So the control and audit system is a matter of a very precise description of how the Polish state will protect the recovery money and how they will also react in case of the need of some corrections, how the system will work in case a fraud or corruption has been suspected to appear in the system and so on. So this is ongoing discussion, and I cannot predict now whether and when the negotiations will be finished. But there is not a direct link of between what's happening in the sphere of judiciary in Poland and the negotiations. And on the Constitutional Tribunal, as you know, the problems relating to the Constitutional Tribunal in Poland play quite a prominent role or have a prominent place in the recent opinion we submitted to the Council under the Article 7. So the discussion, as you know, in the Council is ongoing. Of course, also about the whole system and about the whole reform of judiciary in Poland, which we find very problematic and endangering the independence of judges. But on the Constitutional Tribunal, this is part of it, and we do not address the issues relating to Constitutional Tribunal by some separate procedures. And of course, we take note of the decisions of the Constitutional Tribunal, which recently had put into question the primacy of EU law, which is something we have to react on.
Now, just maybe to explain about the justice part of the discussion with Poland. First of all, also in the recovery plan, we try to see for all the member states if it's possible to implement the country-specific recommendations put forward during the European semester. And there are some remarks, of course, on the justice systems in different member states. So it's a part of the discussion that we have on the recovery plans, like we will take, of course, the new report on the rule of law that we are publishing today as maybe one of the most important sources for the possible application of the new conditionality mechanism. So, of course, there are many other sources coming from the rulings of the ECJ, the Olaf reports, or the reports coming from bodies from the Council of Europe, like the Greco. But, of course, the fact that we have now the Rule of Law Report 2021, it's a part of a possible decision on the use of the conditionality mechanism, and certainly having in our mind that there are some member states who don't want to participate in the European Public Prosecutor Office. And of course, it's also an indication about the ways to protect the EU budget. About the decisions in the last days concerning the justice system in Poland, I want just to insist on the fact that, again, I've sent a letter some times ago to ask to the Polish government to stop the process with the motion of the Prime Minister before the Constitutional Tribunal, because it was a real concern about the primacy of the EU law, to put aside the rulings of the ECJ. So we will see what should be or could be the decision of the Constitutional Tribunal maybe in the beginning of August. But now we have seen, of course, the decision about the interim measures, and it's the reason why we ask now formally, with the letter that I've sent today, to the Polish authorities if they want to comply with the decision of the ECJ, the two decisions, one on the ground about the so-called muzzle law, the law on the judicial reform, but the other one about the interim measures. And of course, in function of the response of the government, we'll see what kind of next step. We have said already in the letter that it's not possible to have a correct application of the ruling of the ECJ. We'll go back to the court asking for financial sanctions.
Thank you. Maintenant, je donnerai la parole à Virginie, aussi de distance. Après, on va revenir vers la salle de presse.
Bonjour, vous m'entendez?
Tout va bien, Virginie, vas-y.
Je voulais savoir, je sais que ça n'a pas été évoqué au collège aujourd'hui, mais ça a été évoqué à la réunion des chefs de cabinet hier. Je voulais savoir pourquoi vous aviez finalement pris la décision de reporter la proposition de la Commission sur les ressources propres.
Merci beaucoup pour cette question, Virginie. Elle n'a pas été l'objet du readout. Je préfère qu'on garde pour l'instant des questions sur le sujet des discussions, qui est le readout sur le paquet Rule of Law. mais je pourrais donner une explication à la fin sur le processus concernant les ressources propres. Mais donc je passe pour l'instant la parole à d'autres collègues qui ont des questions sur le rapport Rule of Law, parce que c'est pour cela que nous avons au podium la vice-présidente et le commissaire chargé de la justice. So I will give the floor to you. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Natalia Segura from the Catalan News Agency. I want to ask about Spain. Two questions. First of all, given the lack of progress during the past year on the renewal of the Council for the Judiciary in Spain, I would like to know what exactly the European Commission is asking for, like, to break the deadlock. And secondly, I wanted to know, like, apparently during the consultations for this year's report, there has been proportionately less complaints about the Catalan issue. So I wanted to know if, do you see this as a positive sign, and if you have seen some progress to lower tensions in this affair?
I will just shortly answer the first question. Well, as you know, there was a very intense dialogue between the Commission, between both of us, I guess, and the Minister of Justice on the necessary renewal of the Council for the Judiciary in Spain, and the Commission is aware that the necessary majority to proceed with the appointment of the new members of the Council has not been reached, and the members of the Council remain in place ad interim since, I think, December 2018. So at this moment, I can only repeat on behalf of the Commission that the importance of pursuing the renovation of the Council and ensuring that the Council is not perceived as being vulnerable to politicization. In other words, we of course took note of the political realities and complexity of the political situation and some kind of blocked process. But at the same time, of course, we have to reiterate again that it's necessary that the Council works and it's not politicized, that the nominations and what's the word of it? When somebody is installed to the role, is fully or is the way to fully independent Council of Judiciary, which Spain needs. So, appointment was the word.
Appointment, yes. No, maybe just one word first about the Catalan issue. Like you said, you know that it's for the Commission an internal constitutional issue in Spain, and so we are following different processes. Of course, we have seen also some discussions with the Court of Auditors in Spain on the financing of some actions during the referendum. So we are following that, but on the basis of the constitutional order in Spain, and to see what should be or could be the final decisions of the different bodies involved in the process in Spain. About the Judicial Council, I want to say that I had the opportunity last Friday to have a first meeting with the new Minister of Justice of Spain, because we had an informal meeting of the Justice Minister during the Slovenian presidency. And what is very clear in the new report this year, we are repeating what we have said last year, just that, because you know that there's no full composition of the Judicial Council since the end of 2018. And so we need to repeat that now it's very important to move on this and to try to go to the appointment. The second element is about the reform, like it was said by the Vice President. And I repeat, like with the previous Minister of Justice, that our request is to apply the European standard. And you know that there are discussions also for the moment in Luxembourg about the constitutional reform. There are discussions in Italy, in Germany, about the same ways to change sometimes the situation with the Judicial Council, because we need to have a majority of the members who are judges elected by their peers. And so we ask to do that. It's a standard coming from the Council of Europe. Of course, it was said by the Vice President, sometimes it's difficult to reach the qualified majority due to the national rules to do that. But I repeat that it's very important to try to engage again discussions for the appointment of the last members of the Judicial Council and to start again discussions on a possible reform.
Thank you very much. I will now go back to questions which are asked remotely. So please raise your hand in the system if you want to ask a question. And of course, keep your questions to the rule of law report, which is the subject of this conference. David Carretta.
Thank you very much, David Carretta, Radio Radical. 3 questions, if I may, but a quick one. First of all, was the report adopted with unanimity, or some members of the college have raised objections or voted against it? Second question to Vice President Jourova. You mentioned the recovery plan of Poland. I'm wondering if you have anything to say on the recovery plan of Hungary, since in the report is quite clear that one of the recommendations made under the semester procedure has not been respected, and with that I mean the independence, the strengthening of the independence of the judiciary. Dernière question pour le commissaire Reinders sur le mécanisme de conditionnalité. Vu que le rapport va être un des éléments importants, en vue de ce rapport, quels sont les pays candidats à voir ce mécanisme activé? Merci.
Merci, David.
Yes. Thank you very much. Very shortly, no, there were 2 reserves in the college. On Hungary, the situation is very similar to the Polish case. The negotiations are ongoing, and here again the Commission is very demanding as for the foreseen audit and control system with all the safeguards and systemic measures in place, so that it is guaranteed that the distribution of money will be legally sound and comparable to the procedures and the requirements which we know from the cohesion policy. How long the negotiations will continue, I cannot predict. I heard from the colleagues that if it is a matter of days when Hungarian and Polish partners will come with the solutions, then it might be a quick endorsement. If it will require weeks, then of course it will have to be postponed.
Non, pour répondre à la question sur la conditionnalité, le règlement s'applique aux 27 États membres. Donc, quand vous demandez quels sont les candidats, le règlement est applicable aux 27 États membres. Il est évident qu'à la lecture, ne fût-ce que du rapport sur l'état de droit, vous allez tout de suite voir que le nombre sera certainement beaucoup plus réduit que cela. Et donc, à la rentrée, notamment dans l'analyse qui sera faite de ce rapport, mais aussi des autres éléments que j'ai mentionnés tout à l'heure, nous verrons s'il y a lieu de commencer des procédures, ce que prépare en tout cas Johan, qui est notre collègue en charge plus particulièrement de ce dossier, vu le lien avec le budget. Il y a évidemment une relation avec le rapport État de droit, il y a une relation avec d'autres éléments État de droit, mais ce sera en liaison avec les analyses budgétaires que les décisions seront prises. Donc voilà, le règlement est applicable aux 27, mais je peux déjà vous dire que le nombre, s'il y a à un moment donné une procédure qui est lancée, le nombre sera beaucoup plus réduit.
Merci beaucoup. Je passerai maintenant la parole à Quentin, aussi connecté de chez lui. Quentin, tu es là?
Oui. Quentin, tu es là?
Oui, bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Tout va bien, vas-y.
Tout va bien, vas-y.
Super. Peut-être c'est 2 questions pour le commissaire Reinders. La première, c'est suite à l'affaire Pegasus, est-ce que comme commissaire à la justice, vous faites confiance aux autorités des données personnelles hongroises ou au système hongrois judiciaire ou tant au niveau du respect des données personnelles pour qu'ils puissent faire une enquête d'une manière saine et d'une manière cohérente et surtout d'une manière sans avoir du political meddling. Et ma deuxième question, c'est par rapport là sur la Pologne, par rapport à ce qui s'est passé la semaine dernière et ce qui se passe actuellement entre la Pologne et la Cour de justice de l'Union européenne, est-ce que selon vous, le fait qu'un pays ne refuse de se plier au droit européen et aux arrêts du Cour européen rentre ou pas dans l'article 3 du règlement sur la conditionnalité de l'état de droit qui fait qu'on peut commencer à activer ce mécanisme? Est-ce que le fait qu'un pays refuse de se plier à la Cour de justice est assez pour pouvoir activer ce mécanisme? Merci.
Alors tout d'abord sur le dossier Pegasus que j'ai évoqué tout à l'heure, nous n'avons pas eu évidemment l'occasion de traiter ce dossier dans le rapport 2021 de l'état de droit puisque les informations sont vraiment très très récentes. On a été très loin dans les données que nous reprenions dans le rapport, mais pas à ce point-là. Alors quand vous demandez de la question de la confiance, d'abord nous allons regarder quelles sont, je l'ai dit, les enquêtes judiciaires qui sont initiées concernant l'utilisation de cette application Pegasus. Il y a déjà une enquête annoncée en France, il y en aura peut-être d'autres, donc il est évident que comme commissaire à la justice, je serai très attentif aux informations qui viendront des enquêtes judiciaires menées sur l'utilisation de cette application, notamment à l'égard de journalistes. Le deuxième élément, pour les autorités de protection des données, bien sûr, nous allons travailler avec les autorités de protection des données, mais en ce compris avec le Conseil au niveau européen qui regroupe toutes les autorités de protection de données, parce qu'il y a probablement des utilisations au départ d'un État membre, mais concernant éventuellement des personnes qui se trouvent dans d'autres États membres. Nous verrons comment faire travailler l'ensemble des autorités de protection des données ensemble. Mais ce qui a déjà été initié avec notre collègue Thierry Breton, c'est que, bien entendu, notamment la DG Connect va travailler sur l'analyse de ce qui s'est passé. Donc vous aurez probablement dans les prochaines semaines et les prochains mois des éléments beaucoup plus concrets venant du travail fait en matière de protection des données personnelles par les autorités de protection des données et le Conseil au niveau européen, les enquêtes judiciaires comme les analyses que nous allons faire au sein de la Commission elle-même. Je crois que c'est important qu'on puisse vraiment couvrir l'ensemble, comme cela a été dit déjà. Si les informations révélées à propos d'un espionnage concernant des journalistes se vérifiaient, c'est totalement inacceptable. Donc nous allons d'abord vérifier la solidité des informations sur le sujet à travers les différentes procédures que je viens d'évoquer. Concernant la Pologne, l'objet de la lettre que j'ai adressée aujourd'hui aux autorités polonaises, c'est justement de leur demander de respecter les décisions de la Cour et d'avoir une réponse formelle sur ce sujet. Donc je vous donne rendez-vous après le 16 août, la date que nous avons fixée pour recevoir la réponse, avant de savoir les conclusions que nous tirerons de ce que la Pologne pourra faire. Je crois qu'il est encore temps de demander de respecter les décisions de la Cour de justice, qu'elles portent sur le fond d'un dossier soumis à la Cour ou qu'elles portent sur des mesures provisoires. Nous avons évidemment pris note, je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, de la décision du Tribunal constitutionnel concernant les mesures provisoires, mais ce que nous demandons maintenant, c'est clairement aux autorités polonaises de respecter les décisions de la Cour et de les mettre en œuvre et de nous expliquer comment ces décisions vont être mises en œuvre. Donc nous verrons d'ici au 16 août si nous aurons une réponse satisfaisante en la matière.
Merci beaucoup, Commissaire Anders. I will now give the floor to Mark Peppercorn, also connected remotely.
Yes, good afternoon, Mark Peperkorn, Volkskrant, Netherlands. Two short questions, I hope. The Hebdo yesterday gave Poland 1 week to comply with the European Court of Justice decisions. Could you explain me why the college made this 3 weeks? And secondly, about the size of the fines in case Poland does not comply. Are we talking about millions or billions? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. Of course, you know that the only decisions are those made by the college in this respect, so it's difficult to comment on any preceding steps, but of course...
Yes. On the sanctions, it will be up to the European Court of Justice to decide what kind of sanctions, whether there will be lump sum or the daily basis, so I don't want to predict on that, but of course the sanctions are here to push the subject to move, and hopefully it will be earlier than the sanctions. So I still hope that by the 16th of August we might still get some positive replies. I always believe till the last minute.
Just to confirm about the procedure, that when I'm signing a letter, it's not on the basis of a decision of the services. In contrary, it's on the basis of the decision of the political body, the college. It's the reason why I have signed the letter after the college, and it's very important to explain that. So, of course, there are many discussions on many issues, but the decision to start a procedure is in the hand of the political body, and I've signed the letter after the college today.
Thank you. Next one is Catherine. Catherine, are you there?
Sorry. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry. Firstly, a question on Poland. Vice President Jourova, you said that there is no direct link between the cases last week and the recovery funds, but the Constitutional Tribunal in court in Poland has already said that it can ignore certain judgments of the European Court and on a selective basis. Surely that means that everything that is EU-related is of a direct link to the decisions last week by the European Court. I can't see how you can see it as anything other than that. And yesterday we were told, this is in relation to Hungary, yesterday at a midday briefing we were told that in relation to the surveillance and the NSO spyware, that Hungary it would be up to them to carry out their own investigation of this software and how it was used. I mean, isn't that ridiculously naive when you have a government that proudly declares itself to be a liberal democracy and then goes on to prove it by attacking the media, by attacking opposition, by removing any voices of dissent? You yourselves have started proceedings about Club Radio. So I'm just wondering how on earth do you think that you're going to get a fair assessment of this spyware by a government that has no respect for the rule of law?
Thank you. Yeah, again, I will leave surveillance of journalists to Didier. He proved to be very good at it, not in surveillance, but in explanation of what the Commission will do. On the first question, I think that we are clearly saying that we are not living in Europe a la carte, that the member states cannot choose what they like and what they dislike, and that the lack of respect for the European Court of Justice rulings is being now tackled by means of the letters which will be sent and which seek for the response by mid-August. And I think that it's quite clear, and I will say it again, that the parallel process are now the negotiations of the recovery plan, where the Commission is looking and analysing very thoroughly how the member state, in this case Poland, is describing how the system of audit and control will work, so that the money is protected, and so that we can we see the legally sound financial management and control system. So two parallel tracks.
No, I may just repeat that about Poland. Of course, we will wait the response of the Polish authorities, because we want to be sure that there is a real intention to be in full compliance with the decision of the court. Till now, we have seen a decision from the Constitutional Tribunal, but we want to have a clear message coming from the authorities, the governmental authorities in Poland. And on such a basis, we'll see what are or what should be or could be the consequence of this. On the NSO spyware, like you said, again, we will use different source of information through different kind of investigation. But of course, first of all, through our own services in the Commission, we will analyze the situation. Of course, if there are information coming from the Member State, it's fine. I've said there are some investigations organized by prosecutor office like in France, but of course, if there are information coming from Hungary, we will take that into account. But we are working first on the basis of our own analyzing the services of the Commission on this.
Thank you very much. There are many more questions which you wish to ask, but we don't have that much time, so I will now take the last two questions. First, Susanna.
Thank you very much, Susana Freixas, SIC Expresso. Commissions, you speak in general terms of an improvement, but I would like to understand if that's also the case for Portugal, since the abstract starts exactly the same way it started last year, saying that the efficiency of the Portuguese justice system remains a challenge. And you are also mentioning a case that you were not mentioning last year, of course, because this is a new case of surveillance seeking to identify journalist sources. And Commissioner Reinders, you were saying earlier that spying on media is acceptable. So do you think that in case of Portugal, instead of improvements, are you seeing here something else? And if I may, because I also like to know the answer to Virginie's question, so maybe if you can comment also on that. Thank you.
So maybe on Portugal, I want to say that, again, you will read maybe not only the abstract, but the entire report and the entire country chapter on Portugal. Certainly about the justice system, like in many other member states, I said already about Slovenia or Bulgaria when we have seen the evolutions, there are huge investment in the modernization of the justice system. And certainly with the recovery plans, we have seen also a real dedication to digital tools, to the digitalization of the justice system. So that's very important to note. And so, of course, there are improvements on this, but there are also some elements where we have seen that there were no positive evolution, like in, again, other member states in the same case. And you spoke about the surveillance of journalists, and the report indicates that while in the first assessment the prosecution service considered that no wrongdoing had taken place, so the Prosecutor General's office launched an investigation to be examined by the High Council of the Public Prosecution Service. And according to the information available to the Commission, the investigation is still ongoing, so it's maybe too early to take a final decision or final appreciation on this. In addition, one of the journalists has filed a criminal complaint against the public prosecutor and the policeman involved, and the Commission does not comment, of course, on ongoing criminal cases, but will follow the situation. So again, we are concerned about such a kind of situation, but there are some procedures for the moment in Portugal, and so we'll see what should be or could be the results of those procedures. And it's not in the same way that we are now concerned by the use of an application for the control or the surveillance of many journalists in one of another country, member states or not.
Thank you very much. The last question will go to Luca, and after that, once we finish with this series of questions on the rule of law report, we'll make a clarification on the resources package, which several of you are interested about. So Luca first.
Thank you, Luca Bertuzzi, you're active. Just I have to insist on the question from my colleague to Commissioner Reinders. Can you confirm the Commission is launching its own investigation on the allegations for on the Hungarian government's use of the spyware? Thank you.
So again, I have said we will use all the possible tools to receive more information on this. So, of course, at the internal level, with the different services of the Commission, we are starting, you mentioned investigations, we are starting to collect information to see what are the possible use of such a kind of application in one of another member states. We have seen the comments in the press about that, but again, we will use also information coming from other kind of investigations, or in justice, or by the data protection authority. So we'll have different tools to do that. But it's true that we have discussed today with our colleague Thierry Breton about the situation, and Thierry Breton will ask to the services, certainly first on DG Connect, to work on it and to collect information on this.
Of course.
Yeah, just one sentence. Of course, I am aware that you asked about the possible infringement process and investigation and these heavy tools, but I want to remind you of the fact that the Commission is now working on the recommendation for the Member States, which should increase security and safety of journalists. And it will cover, of course, the online threats, physical attacks. We have a really extreme number of them already registered this year. It will also touch upon the threats coming from the abusive litigations, where we, of course, plan also separate action. But this surveillance issue, this is coming still on time, that we can cover that issue also in our recommendation, because in case we will find out that at the European level we cannot address it due to the fact that this is the national security issue, however unacceptable, and I think we are very clear about that, we will address this in our recommendation.
Thank you very much. That concludes the part of the press conference devoted to the to the rule of law package. Now I'm getting back to the question asked by Virginie on own resources, because several of you are interested to know about that. So what I can tell you about this is that the Commission remains committed and focused on its work on the own resources package. Work continues on that package, which is now to be adopted in the second part of 2021. The reason is that, as you know, the OECD and G20 framework agreed recently on a broader framework for a more stable and fairer international tax system. And it is important from our perspective to give more time to that framework to continue work on the remaining issues there. So for this reason, our own resources package will come in the second part of this year. Thank you very much, and please stay tuned because there will be another press conference now by Executive Vice President Dombrovskis and Commissioner McGuinness on the anti-money laundering package. Thank you.
Thank you.